On March 16th, we had our second Lenten study. It was a look at God's abundance, but how God provides. And we went into the book of Exodus, where we ran into Moses and the Israelites in the desert. And the Israelites were complaining about hunger, and they were complaining about how they had left Egypt and everything that was familiar to them, and that maybe it might have been better to stay in Egypt as slaves than to follow Moses out into the desert to some unknown promised land that God was promising. And so Moses goes to God with the problem, and God provides. God tells the people of Israel that they will have food every morning. When the dew dries, they will see manna on the ground. And in the evening, they will have quail. So the great problem of hunger is solved. But solving the hunger also came with some rules. Everybody was supposed to collect just the right amount of manna that they needed for the day, and that the next day would provide the next day's manna. The people discovered that if they tried to collect too much, the leftover would rot and have worms in it by the end of the day. So in fact, it was unusable past the day on which it landed in the morning. And on the Sabbath, people weren't to collect any at all. They were supposed to collect 2 measures worth on the day before, so that they would be provided for on their day of rest, the day of rest that the Lord demanded. And of course, some people didn't quite buy that, and they went out on the Sabbath day to find manna and discovered that there was none to be had. So there's a whole bunch of issues in this reading that come up, provocative issues. And as we discovered in our group on Wednesday night, those issues continue to speak to us today. Issues about boundaries, issues about how good are rules for the social order and our own well-being. We talked about how we look back to the familiar and are afraid of the unfamiliar. And even if the familiar was not good for us, it might be more comfortable than living in unfamiliarity. And of course, as we spoke to that, we couldn't help but think of the world situation today, and the situation in Ukraine, and how crazy and unfamiliar and disorienting all of this is for people. And of course, we encounter God, the economist, in this reading. God who provides for everyone according to their need, not according to their desire, not according to how much they worked for it. And so God is a curious economist for us who live in a world where so many people try to get as much as possible with no regard for those who don't have any. And again, this speaks to our faith as individuals and as a faith community, and how we live out this message that God is trying to send in this lesson and in so many others. A message that comes from a place of abundance and a place of wanting people to be fed in all of the ways in which we need feeding. And yet that generosity coming with boundaries and requirements and rules that we are expected to follow. And we are expected to live in a way where we understand that these rules are for our own good, and that life will actually be better and freer living within those rules. Of course, there were people in the group who right away recognized how teachers relate to this kind of a lesson, and how parents relate to this kind of a lesson, and how they can relate to God saying, how long are you going to break these rules of mine? And of course, there is no resolution to these issues, and there's no end to the discussion. But it was wonderful to participate in God's story and see how something that's been around for thousands of years can still speak to us so clearly and so directly today. Please join us as we continue these looks into how God's world and vision compare to our own world and our own visions of how it should be, and where the two might intersect, and how abundance and trust are so much a part of the story. We'll see you soon.